Welcome to Front Page Index. My name is Alex Dadig. Get ready for an education on how to enforce the law in Los Angeles. Nathan Hochman, who is running for Los Angeles District Attorney, is about to tell you. If you've had enough of the lawlessness in Los Angeles, where victims have to fend for themselves, where you can't walk your kids to school, park your car on the street at night, get windows smashed in at your business, hear of someone dying from fentanyl overdose, unenforced vagrancy laws leaving dangerous criminals roaming the street, give your support to Nathan Hochman on March 5th and take back your community.
My name is Nathan Hochman, and I am running for LA County District Attorney. A district attorney is not a king and takes an oath to uphold the law, not just the laws he likes, but all laws. Our current LA DA, George Gascón, has violated that oath, followed a political ideology instead of the evidence, and broken and destroyed his office as well as the partnership with law enforcement. I am the best candidate to provide independent leadership to change that toxic culture. I have over 33 years of criminal justice experience as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and a proven leadership record of successfully running a U.S. Department of Justice tax division with hundreds of lawyers, major international law firms' government investigations practices, and the LA City Ethics Commission as its president. When the public was trying to defund the police several years ago, I co-founded the LA Sheriff's Foundation to help fund that department. When Gascón refused to file 3 strikes cases, I was part of the legal team who successfully sued him and reversed that policy. My record-breaking fundraising, coupled with the important endorsements of former 3-term LA DA Steve Cooley and 5 LA U.S. attorneys, have established me as the frontrunner in this race. Our recent polling has shown that in a head-to-head matchup with George Gascón, I will beat him by 15 to 20 points. The reign of wannabe King George Gascón must end. I can and will beat him in the 2024 elections.
Let the record show 4 years of George Gascón are 4 years too many. Nathan Hochman is the only candidate running for district attorney who can beat George Gascón because he understands the balance between criminal justice system reform while at the same time restoring law and order in Los Angeles. As someone who follows the criminal justice system closely, I can assure you this is the most compelling case ever made to unseat Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascón. I had an opportunity to sit down with Mr. Hochman and ask him some questions Los Angeles voters care about. Recently, DA Gascón promoted Tiffany Blacknell to Chief of Staff. In May of 2020, Ms. Blacknell made a Facebook post about how she was a looter during the 1992 riots. In her social media post, Ms. Blacknell downplayed the looting in Los Angeles during the George Floyd riots. In this post, she also called the United States a bleep hole country. Do you believe Ms. Blacknell has the judgment, maturity, and experience to head a department that oversees more than 800 district attorneys?
Tiffany Blacknell is Exhibit A for why George Gascón should never be reelected as district attorney. I mean, this is probably the worst appointment that George Gascón has ever done. To appoint someone like Tiffany Blacknell, someone who's said that law enforcement are barbarians, that they are an occupying force, someone who wore a t-shirt on their social media that said the police are trained to kill us, yet he has promoted her to his chief of staff, sending the message to the over 900 prosecutors who work for him, for the over tens of thousands of law enforcement officers in LA County, that he places the interests of criminals first, rather than victims or the public. That's a shocking message for a district attorney to say.
Should victims be made aware when a violent offender is released from prison?
Absolutely. You know, we had a law that was passed with the proposition, Marcy's Law, that tried to give certain victims certain rights in the systems, rights to be heard, rights to be notified, rights to, in part, you know, to be part of the process so that they understand the process, they're represented in the process, and they have a say in the process. George Gascón has done his absolute best to remove the victim's voice in the process. I'll give you a perfect example. One of his directives is to go ahead and ban prosecutors from attending parole hearings and accompanying victims. So for instance, if a rape victim goes to a parole hearing of the rapist, and the rapist is represented by the rapist's own counsel, there's a parole board there, the victim is there, and used to be the prosecutor would also be next to the victim, explaining the crime to the parole board, but not under Gascón. Under Gascón, he prohibits his prosecutors from going to these parole hearings. I would restore that on day one. That my administration would be victim-focused, not criminal-focused.
Should someone who murders a police officer in the first degree receive the death penalty?
The decision to give the death penalty in any particular case is probably the most difficult one a district attorney has to struggle with. But in a situation where you have the cold-blooded assassination of a police officer, the death penalty at a minimum should be considered and on the table. And why do I say that? I say it because the death penalty is still part of the law of the state of California. It's been on the books for decades. In fact, in the last 12 years, there were 2 proposition efforts to eliminate the death penalty, and they each failed. So when a district attorney raises his or her right hand and swears to uphold the law, there's no asterisk there. You don't get to choose which laws you're upholding or not, and as long as the death penalty is part of the law, to be used in the rarest of rare situations, but situations like the cold-blooded assassination of a police officer, situations like a huge mass terrorist bombing. I mean, God forbid there should be a bomb going off in the middle of a concert at SoFi Stadium and tens of thousands of people were to be killed. Or we even had the situation that they had in Las Vegas a few years ago where you had a sniper kill 56 people. There are situations that are so heinous, they are designed for the death penalty. And in all those situations, and they're rare, but they exist, we have to consider and put the death penalty on the table each time.
Can you explain to voters why sentencing enhancements are important to public safety?
The reason sentencing enhancements are important, let me give you an example. There's an enhancement called the gun enhancement. And it basically says if you use a gun during the commission of, let's say, a robbery, you will actually get an additional punishment, a punishment of up to 5 additional years in jail. And what it is a disincentive, a deterrence to robbers, and says to them, look, if you want to commit a robbery, which we obviously think you shouldn't, but if you go ahead and commit that robbery, don't use the gun. Because if you use the gun, you're going to go to jail for 5 or at least 5 more years. So what happens now with Gascón is that he's taken those enhancements off the table up front, which is basically telling criminals, go ahead and use the gun because we're going to treat that robbery, whether you use the gun or don't use the gun, exactly the same. And not shockingly, robbers who use guns in aggravated robberies now have skyrocketed over the 3+ years Gascón's been in power.
On October 1st, 2023, DA Gascón issued a new bail schedule with 3 categories. What is your position on each of these categories and this new bail schedule?
The new bail schedule was based on a concept called zero cash bail. I believe that is wrong. But I also believe that the cash bail schedule needed to be modified, and here's why. The system needs to be a risk assessment system. And what do I mean by that? We need to determine who are the people most at risk of committing future crimes or most at risk of not showing up for their court appearances, and they get the higher bail in order to make sure that they don't hurt people in the future and they show up. Now, the current cash bail system is based on the crime. So you could have someone who's very risky to commit more crimes or risky not to show up for their next court appearance, but they can meet the cash bail. They can come up with the money and they get out. And sure enough, they can violate that bail by harming other people. On the other end of the extreme, you had situations where someone actually couldn't come up with a bail, but they posed no risk. And because they couldn't come up with the money, they ended up staying in jail until their next court appearance. We need to bring into the system a full risk analysis, which means within 48 hours, everyone needs to be in front of a magistrate who can do that risk analysis, and then have a pretrial services department that not only gives the magistrate the information to determine risk, but then monitors people once they get out. If we can actually have that type of system, we'll have a bail system that works and prevent this sort of turnstile of justice where people are getting arrested in the morning and they're out by the afternoon.
In prior debates, it has come to light that there is a 13,000 or more case backlog in the DA's office. What, in your view, has caused this case backlog?
What's caused this backlog is in large part the fact that people don't want to work for George Gascón. So not only do you have a 13,000 case backlog, you have basically at least 100 positions that have gone unfilled because George Gascón can't get enough applicants to actually fill those positions because no one wants to work for the most pro-criminal DA in the entire United States of America. Hopefully, when we get a DA who wants to do their job, that DA can bring in talented people who can attack that 13,000 case backlog and bring it down to zero.
Is diversion succeeding?
Diversion can succeed if you properly calibrate who should be in diversion and who shouldn't. So if you find someone who's under the age of 18 who doesn't have a criminal history, and for instance, they get involved with a low-level theft case, they might be at the fork in the road, where if they're given some type of diversion program or community service, they might never be back in the criminal justice system again. But if they are habitual offenders, they've done this over and over and over again, or the crimes have escalated, and now you're into aggravated robbery, perhaps you're into using a gun, or the highest levels of murder. Those type of juveniles should not be tried necessarily in juvenile court, as Gascón's original special directive said. Those are the type of small category of juveniles that should be in adult court.
George Gascón says his policies are generating millions in criminal justice system cost savings. Where are these savings being reinvested?
George Gascón certainly doesn't deal with the costs of his alleged savings. So yes, if you don't put anyone in jail, you're going to save the costs. It can be up to $88,000 a year to put someone in state prison. But what about the cost to the victims? What about the cost to someone who loses a relative who got shot by someone who should otherwise be in jail? What about a store owner who just watched their entire store be destroyed? And they're not CVS, they're not Rite Aid, they don't have an insurance policy or the ability to move. They just watch the life savings walk out the door. George Gascón doesn't deal with those costs of his alleged savings. Again, the criminal justice system is designed to spend money to bring safety to the residents of LA County. George Gascón has completely forgotten that.
In February of 2020, George Gascón said, in a policy discussion at USC, he proved he could find a balance between reducing incarceration and increasing public safety. Did he?
No. George Gascón has failed to find that balance. If George Gascón was even mediocre, I wouldn't run for district attorney. It's the fact that he has gone ahead and adopted the most pro-criminal blanket policies in LA County history that I'm running for district attorney to right the ship, to basically reinvigorate law enforcement, restore trust that the public needs to have in the system that they have lost, and bring back the idea that there is accountability for all actions, and that we're not going to pick certain crimes and certain criminals and just turn our heads away and pretend that they don't exist. Accountability will be the hallmark of my administration, and a proportional look at what's going on. In fact, I call it the hard middle. The hard middle is a rejection of the blanket policies of Gascón for decarceration, and quite candidly, the blanket policies of the other end of the pendulum swing of mass incarceration. The hard middle is an individualized analysis of each criminal, each crime committed, and the impact on the victim, to see who the true threats are to our public safety and need to be behind bars, and the ones that aren't. Your first-time nonviolent offender who can use community service or diversion programs to not re-enter our system, great. But the ones that are the true threats to our society will be behind bars.
Please visit nathanhochman.com to learn more about how you can take back your community by supporting Nathan Hochman for District Attorney on March 5th. From the front lines of America's leading political news and opinion, I'm Alex Static with Front Page Index, Politics for You.